All right. So, speaking of maximums, right? One other maximum that we have is we have an issue where processors can only process so fast, right? In other words, the actual cycles, how many times it can process a cycle per second. There is an actual pretty finite maximum that we've hit. It's somewhere in that 4 gigahertz region. Okay, we just don't have the technology to figure out a way to make it move faster. So we have to find another way to make our processors faster. And one way of making processors faster, one creative way, was something called threading. Okay, the original processors did single threading. Okay, basically in RAM, right? So out in the RAM, we had data for a task, and we'd have data for a second task. And what basically had to happen was that the data for the first task would be sent into the processor, it would be processed, and then task 2 data could be sent in, okay, one thread at a time. Well, we've now come out with something called hyper-threading, or sometimes it's referred to as multi-threading. And it's the idea, it was one of the very first virtualization type ideas. Now, don't get this confused with the type of virtualization that we're going to continue talking about, where we have virtual machines and things like that. But it was almost like virtualizing 2 processors within one physical processor, to where you now could send 2 tasks into the processor at the same time, and it could process them parallel with one another. Okay, it had the ability to multitask and do 2 threads of commands at the same time. Now, there are some catches that go along with hyperthreading. You have to have systems that support it. Okay, you have to have applications that were built to cooperate with it. And again, if you go back in time, in the old days when hyperthreading first came out, there were some issues. Not everything was compatible. In today's world, pretty much everything is equipped to support hyperthreading. But keep in mind, it's still just one actual execution core. Okay, there's only one actual processing core. It just figured out how to multitask more than one process at a time. And I will tell you that part of how this happens is because we find wasted resources. We're going to see that anywhere you hear virtualization technology in any capacity ever referred to, it's because we find that the resources are actually capable of more than what we were asking them to do. Okay, so hyperthreading gave us the ability to better utilize the resources by virtually making it seem as though you had 2 processors, even though it was really one just multitasking.